In 2011, Nintendo released the 3DS, the long-awaited successor to the DS and DSi. It cost $250, a whole $100 more than the DS's launch price. Due to this high price, along with a lack of compelling games, 3DS sales soon ground to a halt. Just 5 months later, Nintendo shocked the world by slashing the system's price by almost a third, with company president Satoru Iwata personally apologizing for the debacle. Well, 14 years later, consumers have yet again been rather shocked by an overly expensive Nintendo hardware launch. And so, I want to go back to those early months of 2011 and take a look at what was happening within Nintendo, why they chose to cut the 3DS price, how people reacted, and more. Let's talk about the time Nintendo dropped their console price. So, it was in 2010 that the Nintendo 3DS was first revealed to the world. Information came in a kind of drip feed throughout the year. News reports in February suggested that developer kits for a new Nintendo handheld had been given out to select developers in Japan, like Pokemon's Game Freak. In March, Nintendo officially confirmed that they were developing a new console named 3DS, of which they would share more details later in the year. But it was in June at the E3 trade show where Nintendo fully unveiled the 3DS, along with a number of exciting games like Kid Icarus Uprising, Animal Crossing New Leaf, a new Mario Kart, Star Fox 64 3D, and Ocarina of Time 3D. The reaction to the idea of glasses-free 3D gaming was overwhelmingly positive. Absent, however, was information on price and launch date. But come September, Nintendo held a press conference in Japan, announcing that the 3DS would launch on February 26, 2011, for the price of 25,000 yen. At the time, that equated to about $300. Pretty steep. But one fan blog assured, it's never an exact conversion between countries, so expect the 3DS to be cheaper than that. So that's everything you need to know about what happened in 2010. But starting in 2011, things started going downhill. On the 19th of January, Nintendo held press conferences in both New York and Amsterdam, where they announced the international price and release date of the 3DS. It would be launching on the 25th, 27th, and 31st of March in Europe, North America, and Australia, respectively. And it would cost $249. That is quite the price, $100 more than the original DS at launch. In the UK, the console would cost between £219 and £229 depending on the shop, a price which UK newspaper The Guardian described as hefty for a handheld console, writing, "Gamers will find its charms hard to resist, despite the high price." I think that sums up a lot of the general feeling. The 3DS was intriguing, exciting, but also pretty darn expensive. According to Satoru Iwata, president of Nintendo at the time, this higher-than-expected price was decided on after the overwhelmingly positive reaction to the console's reveal the previous year. He believed the console would get off to a rocket start and hit the sales goal of 4 million units by the end of March. On the 26th of February, the Nintendo 3DS launched in Japan. News reports from release day show huge crowds of people queuing up to get their hands on the system. Just 2 days later, Nintendo had sold out their entire first shipment of 400,000 DSs. The launch was off to a good start. It was at the end of March when the 3DS launched in Europe, North America, and Australia. Reactions from international players were a little more tepid. This was mainly due to the launch games, which were all a little underwhelming. First was Steel Diver, a brief novelty at best. Then Nintendogs Plus Cats, which felt far too similar to its predecessor, like a remnant of a bygone era. And then finally, Pilot Wings Resort, which was probably the best received of the three games, but still felt shallow and lacking in content. None of these games were a so-called killer app, a game so good it would motivate people to go out and buy a 3DS for themselves. Plus, there was the problem of the 3D. Yes, the inclusion of glasses-free 3D was a fun novelty, but it could lead to eye strain in players. Nintendo was so concerned that this health hazard could become a major issue that they suggested players 6 and under should avoid using the 3D feature at all. But 6 and under is a key demographic for Nintendo, especially for a handheld console. So, would the combination of the three factors, high price, lack of a killer app, and anxiety around health impacts of 3D, hurt the console's sales? Well, Nintendo was soon about to find out. On the 26th of April, the bad news began. Nintendo released their financial results, where they revealed that they'd not met their target of selling 4 million units by the end of March, falling short by 400,000. President Satoru Iwata told investors, 3DS sales were high in the initial week, but sales fell below our expectations after the second week. Nintendo 3DS has not been selling as expected since the second week, and this is not just in the Japanese market, but also in the United States and Europe. In less formal terms, sales for the 3DS had pretty quickly fallen off a cliff. Nintendo didn't expect 3DS sales to drop like this, read one news report. We recognize that we are in a situation where we need to step up our efforts to further promote the spread of Nintendo 3DS, said Iwata. May was a pretty quiet month for the 3DS and for Nintendo. Within the company, staff were hard at work on preparations for the E3 trade show the following month, which they hoped might be a turning point for the 3DS's sales. There was still a fundamental lack of enticing games on the 3DS, and E3 would be the perfect chance to show off a whole array of Nintendo heavy hitters. As June grew closer, it was time to see whether this would be the chance to drive the 3DS to success. Nintendo's E3 show took place on the 7th of June. In it, the company showed off a whole host of major titles, including Luigi's Mansion 2, Animal Crossing, Star Fox 3D, Kid Icarus Uprising, Super Mario 3D Land, and perhaps most importantly, Mario Kart 3DS, which was given the launch date of Holiday 2011. These weren't new games for the most part, but the confirmation that these heavy-hitting titles were coming sooner rather than later at least provided those who'd already bought a 3DS assurance that they'd not got their hands on a complete dud. But with sales still slow, Nintendo would need to make a more drastic move to save the 3DS. As June passed into July, 3DS sales stayed low, far below Nintendo's targets for the system. In late July, Nintendo released their financial results for the previous 3 months, and they didn't look good at all. The company made a net loss of 25.5 billion yen from April to June, and sold just 710,000 3DS units in that time frame, which is a truly disastrous figure. As a result, the company made a shocking announcement. they would be slashing the 3DS's price from 25,000 to 15,000 yen. In the US, the console's price dropped from $249 to just $179. That's a 32% reduction, which is something almost entirely unheard of in the world of video games. For Nintendo to take such a drastic measure only 5 months after the launch of the system shows just how dire the situation was. So, what exactly prompted Nintendo's decision? Well, without any hit games until later in the year, the price of the 3DS was the only factor that Nintendo had any control over. If customers weren't willing to spend $250 on a console without any major games, perhaps they would spend $180. However, that's not the only potential reason. According to industry insiders, there would have been a huge amount of pressure from retailers to lower the price. Across the US, Japan, and Europe, shop shelves were filled with 3DSs that no one was buying. One industry analyst told IGN, "Retail is definitely a factor in this decision. 3DS has just not been moving in stores, not moving at all. I think this price drop is appropriate. Normally you'd expect them to wait until the fall, but frankly, why wait?" But making such a drastic move does not come without consequences. Nintendo president Satoru Iwata cut his own salary in half and released a statement of apology to current owners of 3DS who had paid the higher price. Greetings everyone, this is Satoru Iwata from Nintendo. Thank you very much for purchasing a Nintendo 3DS. In the past, there have been price drops for video game systems some time after their release in order to broaden the user base further. However, never before has Nintendo chosen to issue such a dramatic price drop less than 6 months after a system release. We are all too keenly aware that those of you who supported us by purchasing the 3DS in the beginning may feel betrayed and criticize this decision. Those customers who purchased the 3DS at the very beginning are extremely important to us. We know that there is nothing we can do to completely make up for the feeling that you are being punished for buying the system early. Still, we would like to offer the following as a sign of our appreciation to you. And this is where the 3DS Ambassador program comes in. This program compensated users who'd bought a 3DS at the more expensive price by offering them 20 free games. 10 of those games were retro NES titles, such as Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid. The other 10 were Game Boy Advance games, Metroid Fusion, Mario Kart Super Circuit, The Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap, and more. To this day, the only way to play these GBA games on 3DS is as part of the Ambassador program. If you missed out, GBA games are simply not available any other way. It was in early August that the 3DS price drop took effect. How did pre-existing owners of the console feel about it? Well, on the whole, not as put out as you might have expected. According to one owner, "As an early adopter, I'm definitely annoyed, but only to an extent. I've been doing this whole gaming thing long enough to know that there is always a risk with new hardware, and the selection of free games for us early birds looks satisfactory." Another person who bought a 3DS just days after launch took the opinion that, even without the freebies, I think early adopters would understand that Nintendo's a business and it's got to do what's right by them. It's better for the rest of us. Too few 3DS units sold means fewer games. And that's a good point. Everyone benefits from a successful console. So, did Nintendo's drastic move turn things around? Well, initially, certainly it did. In the first few days of the price drop, Nintendo sold almost 215,000 units in Japan alone, with the rest of the global market seeing similar sales spikes. But what really turned the 3DS's fortunes around was a combination of factors. Nintendo managed to get both Mario Kart 7 and Super Mario 3D Land ready for release by the end of the year. And together with the price cut, the 3DS suddenly became a much more enticing buy. Plus, it was in late 2011 when Nintendo announced that Monster Hunter 4 would be exclusively available on the 3DS, rather than Sony's PlayStation Vita. For a lot of hardcore Japanese gamers, that made the 3DS a must-have. Going into 2012, Nintendo continued with the push for regular and enticing game releases. So, it was by no means the price cut alone that saved the 3DS, but it certainly helped rejig the balance between cost and value in the eyes of potential customers. The 3DS went on to become an extremely successful console for Nintendo, selling over 75 million units by the end of its life. In 2020, Nintendo finally made the decision to discontinue the 3DS, 9 years after its launch, and 3 years after the release of its even more lucrative successor, the Nintendo Switch. But had it not been for that price cut in summer 2011, Nintendo might never have been able to turn the 3DS around from a console that stores simply couldn't sell to one of Nintendo's most successful systems. Thanks so much for watching, and a huge thank you to my patrons for supporting videos like this one. In particular, a big thank you to Alison Withenall, Brett and Eric, Candy Crystal, Cyprian Eov, Daryl Gero, Ellie Birnbaum, Elise Rose Barsness, Eliza the Doe, Hi There and Bye, Jim Gilsonen, Kieran Chand, Lucas Little, Michael Gunter, Preston Kurth, Skator Pie, Thomas Söderlund, and Tlazot Lalia.